Awesome. OK. So like you said, I'm here, and I'm a hardware hacker by day, by night, whatever. But I'm here to talk about stopping the fanaticism in JavaScript and in general. My speaker slides are not going with me. So cool story. I don't always know what I'm doing, and I wanted to preface this talk with that. And I have a lot of opinions in this talk, and I think if we disagree, that's great, and I'd love to have a discussion about it. But I want to admit I don't always know what I'm doing. On Twitter, I'm Node Botanist. That's a recent change. I used to be like my name on Twitter, and now I'm Node Botanist. I'm an engineering evangelist at Retell Me Not. You can ask me what that means later. Like you said, JavaScript developer. I do full stack, and I do robots with the NodeBots team. I'm an Austinite, and I'm an opinionated GIF addict. Pause to press the B key to resume. Oh, brilliant. All right. Really? And now these slides have decided to. Awesome. There we go. Close enough. I can fix this. Sorry about that. Really? Now they're both out of sync. Fantastic. Sorry about this. All right. Anyway. So we have a fanaticism problem in JavaScript. I don't think that's really deniable at this point. It happens to all languages at some point where you end up with this diversification of tools and frameworks. And so there's basically a clique or a group around each one. And they cross over from being passionate about it to fanatic about it. And we're gonna talk about like what that means and where it can go wrong and how we can kind of avoid it. Awesome. Well, I wrestle with my slides program here. Close enough. Really? Kidding me. They're both completely out of sync now, and I can't get it to. All right, sorry. Anyways, one of the biggest. Okay, you know what? Refresh. Come on. Of course. So I'm going to talk about my next slide while it's loading. So of course. So we're alienating developers when we are fanatic, and not just. The browser, everybody. JavaScript. Awesome, right? We're alienating developers. And, oh, you've got to be kidding me. All right, good. We're good. Really? All right, are we done? Are we good? OK. We're alienating developers for the fourth time. We're alienating not just veterans, but we're definitely alienating newer developers. I had a mentee, I guess is the word. She struggled really hard and learned Angular. And I know, don't even start. But she learned Angular, and she was so excited, and she went to a meetup, and this guy went, well, actually. End of that story. She was super upset and felt she wasn't really a JavaScript developer, and that's ridiculous. We shouldn't be doing this. A few other examples are, I give a few talks about Flight, which is a front-end framework from Twitter. And one of the first times I gave this talk, I sat down immediately after my talk, and this person comes running over to me with a laptop. And they go, look, I rewrote your example in 10 minutes with my favorite framework. That proves my favorite framework is better than yours. Those were his exact words with the actual name of the framework redacted. And I thought, OK, that means you missed the last 10 minutes of my talk to prove you were right. OK, I guess. And the user group aficionado is the story with the well, actually, and the Angular student. And then the day of my JSConf talk in June, someone released a blog post that morning explaining how my entire talk was bunk. And it was pretty hilarious to everyone but me at the time. We are arbitrarily preventing ourselves from writing the best software by engaging in this fanaticism. We are becoming myopic, and we have a serious problem with tunnel vision when it comes to selecting tools, selecting frameworks, or lack thereof. And it's arbitrarily preventing us from building the best software. There's no reason we can't. I want to note, passion does not equal fanaticism. I'll go into this a little more in detail. we're mostly talking about fanaticism and not passion, which, again, I'll go into the difference in a bit. So some symptoms of fanaticism. Twitter arguments, blanket universal statements, and dismissive behavior. The next time I hear, well, actually, from someone in a user group, I'm just going to get an air horn. I swear, I'm just going to get an air horn, and I'm just going to burr, like every time I hear, well, actually. I even say it myself, and I will blow the air horn at myself. This kind of dismissive behavior, it's preventing the kind of engagement that we need from developers to, again, build better software together. With blanket and universal statements, things like saying, oh, this feature is terrible, just across the board. I've really never seen a feature of a language that was just terrible across the board and never had any use. I mean, I haven't seen it yet. It could happen. Someone will probably point out some arbitrary function that they've written to show that, yes, something can be terrible in all contexts, and that's great. But so the one thing I've definitely noted about fanatics is the first question when presented with a new tool or framework is, how is X like my favorite? I used to run a Node user group, and this person would show up every time, and they had the same question every time. How is this like Rails? Well, we presented Johnny 5. How is this like Rails? They're nothing alike. You can't compare Johnny 5 to Rails. And when he asked about Express, I was like, okay, I get it. That's all right, okay. Sales, I was like, oh, really? Sales, Rails, they're basically the same thing, except different languages. But anyway, they always ask, how is X like my favorite? And that question elicits the same response from me every time, regardless of whether it's valid or not. And that's just frustration, just utter frustration. So some other symptoms of fanaticism that may not directly result from the person, but the community in general. Nail-hammer syndrome. When you have a hammer, everything's a nail. I see a lot of people using tools for things the tools were not built for, because it's their favorite. And that's cool. It's cool that it's your favorite, but don't use a task runner to build, don't use a task runner to do anything other than run tasks, I guess. Don't use a framework to, put around your task runner. Don't, wedge these tools in where they don't necessarily belong. I hear a lot about magic in frameworks mostly, but sometimes in tools. And the funny thing about magic is when it does what you want, it's fantastic, and it's great, and you should use it. But if you're using a tool that has a lot of magic in it and the magic doesn't do what you want, I find you tend to spend more time fighting the magic than you get from using the tool or the framework. The word opinionated. I have a funny relationship with the word opinionated. I see it as someone being smug because they think their opinions should be pushed on everybody else. And if you have configurable opinions, awesome, great, cool. But opinionated usually means we're setting this configuration and this is how you should do things always. And like it says on the slide, I have opinions too. And the more opinions you have, the less likely they're going to line up with mine. And when it comes to conversation, that's great. When it comes to a tool or a framework, that's a recipe for disaster. So there's quite a few pitfalls to this level of fanaticism that we've reached in the JavaScript community. And one is very steep learning curves, much like the curves of the stage that I am having a lot of fun pacing, actually. We've got these really steep learning curves, and it's to the point where I was at my alma mater recently, and a bunch of students came up to me, and they go, we want to be JavaScript developers. I was like, perfect, great. And they go, what framework do we need to learn first? No, you don't need to pick a framework. You need to learn JavaScript. And they're like, well, we won't get a job unless we pick the right framework. And I don't think I spoke for 3 seconds, which is rare for me. And I didn't know what to say. They thought they couldn't get a job unless they picked the right framework. It's infuriating, really. I find there's a lot of complete dependence on the tools that we use. And we learn how to do everything the way those tools teach us to do it. And that's cool until the maintainer of that tool or that framework disappears in a go-colored puff of smoke. Granted, Express was handled pretty well. Someone picked it up immediately, and actually, the maintainership of the project really didn't change all that much. But what if no one had taken it over, right? All these people with Express would be like, well, and Express is very opinionated. So they'd have to learn a whole new way of doing things. And to me, when you're a fanatic, I can spot it pretty quickly, and I bet you can too, because it's that person. You know what I mean? You just see them, and they're like, well, I think Rails is the best, or I think X framework is the best because it's always been the best. And if you ask them why they think that, they go, well, because everybody says that. I'm like, okay, but why? And then they just kind of stand there. Either they straw man or they say, well, you just don't know that framework, so you don't know. Now, that's okay, I guess. So a note on language fanaticism. And this is a slide I've had forever. This is not in response to anything that happened today, I promise. To all the CoffeeScript haters, fat arrow syntax, that's all I got for you. Like, I don't like CoffeeScript either, but there were some really great ideas to come out of CoffeeScript. And a lot of people learned CoffeeScript and then learned JavaScript. And if anything that breaks down the barrier to education in code, I'm for, generally. To the class and inheritance haters, again, I swear this slide was pre-written. I feel especially that a lot of people have been dismissive about the class keyword. Again, I swear this was rehearsed. And I really don't think it's that big of a deal. If you don't like classes, don't use classes, but don't tell me that I can't or shouldn't or it's a terrible idea. And to all the folks crying Java, no, classes will not turn JavaScript into Java. Nothing will turn JavaScript into Java. Nothing will. Again, you can feel free to argue me on that, but I seriously don't see JavaScript turning into Java, especially not over class and inheritance. But how do we fix fanaticism? Oh, good, I'm like running early, actually. I can slow down a little bit. So how do we fix it? This is the important part, so I'm going to slow down anyway. The first thing you can do is ask yourself questions, constantly. Question every decision you make. It takes a lot less time than you think it does. Go ahead and take like 2 seconds now while I drink this drink of water, and just think about like your favorite thing. Think about why you use it for like 2 seconds. All right. Wasn't terribly long. You may have discovered something about yourself. You may not have. That's cool. I think the first question we should ask when we're approached with a new tool or framework or whatever is not how is it like my favorite, but how is it going to make my life better? What can I learn from it? What can I do with this? Not how is it like my favorite. We need to break out of that mentality. Some other questions we can ask, am I fully utilizing this? Is there something I can do to shrink, especially from like a performance standpoint? jQuery has custom builds, for instance, so if you're only using a couple things in jQuery, think about, oh, maybe you're only using things that are also an underscore. So maybe you can include underscore or Lodash or something like that instead. Am I really using this framework, or am I just using the views? Well, can I break that out, or can I find another tool to handle my views without using this framework? Where are my pain points and what is causing them? We did a real audit, and we do a constant audit at Retail Me Not on the UI team of what our pain points are. At one point, it was a slow build process, so we got rid of Rake, and we went to Grunt. Then it was a slow build process, so we got rid of a lot of our Grunt tasks. Then it was testing, so we started writing our own testing thing, because we tried a few others, and they didn't quite fit our needs. And then finally, and this one I find goes underestimated a lot, is does this work well with my other choices? This is especially important for frameworks. A lot of frameworks want code that's like theirs. And sometimes it can be hard to put code that's not a plugin or a subset of that framework into your code. So think about how this decision will affect decisions in the future. If you pick this technology that kind of locks everything else out, what happens a week from now when it doesn't have the plugin you need? So new and shiny and it's not stable are the two things I find that lead to fanaticism a lot. New and shiny is, oh, this tool is new. It must be better. It must somehow be better than everything else that's existed. And I must loudly proclaim that from the top of this hill. I saw this a lot when Gulp came out. Grunt's terrible, Grunt's awful, everybody just started like hating on Grunt. And I was just confused because Grunt's still a very stable, very handy task runner in JavaScript. For instance, one way we use it is when I'm teaching designers in Girl Develop It. They may not necessarily have the programming chops to do Gulp, but they can do Grunt, they can do JSON. So why necessarily is Grunt terrible and I shouldn't show it to these people? I mean, even if it is a tiny bit slower, does that warrant an overhaul? And it's not stable is my favorite for keeping a hold of the choices we already have. Oh, well, that new one's not stable, so I'm going to stay with what I have. Funny story, Node's still in, what, 0.10? Anyone who uses Node and gives me that argument, I kind of laugh, because it's like, Node's in 0.10, and yes, it's stable. Like, that's kind of what I mean by it's not stable. It's an unstable version number. Question the developer status quo. I actually had this conversation a couple hours ago where, again, Angular hating. And I asked why. Well, everybody hates Angular. OK, cool. But why? Nothing. Like, OK, I don't much care for Angular because I don't want my HTML to have a bunch of extra data attributes. Awesome, great, cool. I'm on board with that. Think about why you like or dislike a tool, or why you even include it. I caught myself adding jQuery to a page where I had a console.log, and I think that was about it. Like, it was an if statement and a console.log. And I thought to myself, OK, why did I include jQuery again? And just realized I just did it because it was reflexive. So you want to evaluate what you do with your reflexes and what drives you to make these decisions. Try new things. I mean, that seems kind of obvious, but it's something I notice a lot of people bashing a technology before they've tried it, or because their friends do. I caught myself doing that with Rails, actually. I used to very much dislike Rails because, well, I was a Node developer, and Node developers didn't like Rails, right? And I tried it, and I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it nearly as much as I thought I did. So just try new things. This is a question I get every time I give this talk. But Cass, are you saying I should never, ever use a framework, ever? No. I'm not saying that. Not at all. I'm simply saying be judicious about the choices that you make. Think about the framework that you're using. Is it truly helping you build an application faster, better, more testable? Or is it giving you a gilded cage where you're fighting the framework constantly and you feel like it's making your work better? You have to think about that for a pretty long time and evaluate it pretty thoroughly before you can make that decision. So what's important about breaking out of fanaticism is how to live with your new choices as a team. When you stick to one favorite for your however long you stick to it, it's easy to just start a new project and you know all the drills and you know how to do everything. But what if you change? Your team has to live with that change. You have to live with that change. And it's difficult. I'm not going to lie. It's difficult. Change is difficult. I mean, really. When I look for a new tool or a new framework, I try to write the API I need first. I go, what calls do I need? Do I want promises? Do I want, I don't know, do I want it to be in CoffeeScript or not? Usually my answer is no, but your answer might be yes. That's cool. Use that API that you write as a measuring tool. It may change. Don't hold it as iron law. It can change, obviously. But it's kind of like a rough draft for picking the tools and the frameworks that you want to use, is writing this API. And it actually can come in handy later, and I'll explain that in a bit. Abstraction layers don't suck. I hear a lot about people being upset about abstraction layers, and they can get out of hand. I will admit that handily. I was a Java developer for a little while. Abstractions can get way out of hand. But they aren't always a bad idea, especially if you want to try something that is unstable, or you don't know if it's going to be maintained for a long time. So take that API you wrote and use it. Write an abstraction layer that makes calls to the tools you just made, or the tools you just picked, or the framework you just used. Use the API you just wrote, and then that way, if you do need to change tools, you just replace the abstraction layer. You're good. Yes, performance, I know. Don't even. But it tests your performance, obviously, but I really don't think abstraction layers, unless, again, they get out of hand, are not going to cause that big of a deal for you, especially with the way computers are built. Mobile is a little different, but build a proof of concept in whatever you're going to try. And I don't mean hello world. We had a meeting. We were picking a framework at one of my previous jobs. And we decided on Backbone because we hello worlded it and it was the easiest. That was the worst year of my life. Backbone was the worst decision for my team. I'm not saying Backbone is bad. I'm saying for the team I was on and the project we were doing, it was not a good decision. And it's because we based our decision on a hello world proof of concept. Not, it was awful. Again, think about your pain points. Write your proof of concept to test your pain points. Does it help or does it hurt? Think about it. Let's see. Build it with your team. Don't just, I've seen teams do this where they all go build their own proof of concept. That does not tell you how well it's going to work in the real world, because in the real world, everybody's looking at the same code. Usually, again, blanket statements. I was just talking about those. Brilliant. Anyway, usually other people are going to be touching your code, so you need to think about how you work as a team with that particular thing. Does it cause a lot of confusion if you're working on different things in tandem, or does it work well? And again, if you don't adopt the tool or the framework and you don't like it, at least you probably learned something. Either about the way you code or the way that framework does something that you might adopt, or you probably learned something. So I mentioned that fanaticism is not passion. These are the signs of passion. Issue reports, documentation, pull requests, blog posts, conference talks. These are the things that show passion as opposed to fanaticism. I mean, you can show fanaticism while showing passion, but you get my point. There are ways you can show love for a tool or a framework without being a fanatic. I find the line between passion and fanaticism, passion is having a preference, and having a preference is great. It's what makes us all different and unique and special. Forcing your preference on others or shaming others for having a different preference is fanaticism. That's where the line is drawn. It's when we begin to shame others or force others to hold our opinions that we become fanatic. So I have one last thought. And again, these slides, I presented them in Chicago last week. I did not add anything, and this part makes me really nervous. So we have a bigger problem than frameworks and tools and whatnot. We have hiring fanaticism. And it's a serious, serious issue. And I think it's more pervasive and more of a problem than any of the other types of fanaticism I've spoken about today. 56% of women leave tech before their career ends. That means half, more than half, of the wonderful, fantastic, and brilliant women I've met are going to quit for the end of their career. That upsets me, and I hope it upsets you, to think that half of the wonderful, smart women you've met will leave their jobs by the end of their career. Marginalized groups continue to face serious issues breaking into and staying in tech. And just about every conference, I see another person from a marginalized group insulted publicly, and I see very few real apologies. That's equally upsetting. And I can bet you that that's part of why 56% of women leave. There are things we can do about this as well. Learn about privilege, like Carolina said yesterday. CJ Silverio also gave a fantastic talk about diversity at Cascadia called No More Unicorns. I suggest you take a look. And act on it. Emily Rose said to me yesterday, and I love it, your work culture should not reflect your personal culture. You should not hire your drinking buddies. You should not hire your friends. Maybe you could. Maybe your friends are fit for the job. That's cool, but you shouldn't hire your friends exclusively. You should hire someone different from you. That includes me. I need to find someone different from me, and I need to get them hired. But surprise, none of us really know what we're doing all of the time. None of us are geniuses that literally make no mistakes ever. So instead of proclaiming how right we are all the time, which we're not, we should learn from each other. Learn from the tools people have built, learn from the code people have written, and learn from the experiences people have had. Because developer happiness is contagious. I really love that GIF. I do. I love those babies are just so excited. Apparently, it's their father playing guitar that makes them do this. And they do it like every time. It's fantastic. So thanks for listening. I'm exhausted. I'm Kassandra Perch. I am Node Botanist on Twitter. That's my email address. I'm an engineering evangelist at Retail Me Not. And I'm 6 minutes early, but it's all good. Thank you very much.